welcome to this Dreamweaver tutorial. My name is Daniel Walter Scott and I'm a trainer here at Bring Your Own Laptop. Now in this tutorial what we're going to look at is using the EAMS measurement for fonts instead of pixels or points. So in the previous tutorial, just to make things easy, we looked at using points to size fonts. Now the reason we don't like points is because they're called something called an absolute font size. And the real reason we don't like them is because it doesn't work for people that are visually impaired that need to increase their font size, and it doesn't. And in that fact, Google doesn't like them for that reason. So we do what Google likes, and one of the things is using these EAMS fonts. So let's look at what they are. So at the moment, I've got my H1 selected. So in main CSS, H1, and you drop down to text, and you can see I've used this font size of 20 point. Okay, so that's what they call an absolute font size. It's like a millimeter or a meter or a yard or a foot, and they are physical measurements. You can't have a slightly bigger millimeter, okay, or a slightly bigger inch. An inch is an inch is an inch. It's an absolute size. Whereas something like a percentage is a relative size. So a percent is dependent on the total overall size. So 20% of something really depends on what 100% is. So that is what the difference between a relative and an absolute font size. So points and pixels are absolute. We're going to use this one called EAMS, which is a relative point size. So let's look at creating one of those. So essentially all you need to do is you need to come into here and change it from 20 points, okay, to, we're going to use EAMS, E-M, okay, and a rough start is going to be 1.2 EAMS, E-M. So I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to show what that size looks like, and then explain why we use it. Can you see 1.2 EAMS is a lot smaller than we had for 20 pixels, so I'm going to increase it up a little bit. So to 1.7, that's getting closer to the size that I have. Now what happens is, an EAM is one of the default font size. Now most of the browsers we use, so Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Internet Explorer, they roughly have a font size as their default is 16. So if you say I want this thing to be 1 EAM, you are telling the browser to use one of its default font size, which normally is 16 points. Okay, so I can pretty much guarantee that if I use 1 EAM, it's going to look about 16. So let's have a look at the difference between the two. So if I make this my 1.7 EAMS, okay, and I've left my H2 as 17 pixels, and same with my my paragraph tag, I've left that as 12 points. Okay, so that is fixed sizes; they shouldn't change. Why? The reason we don't like using these ones is when it gets to a person who's, say, visually impaired and using a screen reader that needs to help them, it'll enlarge all the fonts for them to help them work with the website. Let's look at demoing that. So if I preview it in Firefox, now this is loaded up in Firefox. Now, what happens is if I have a problem with my vision, what I can do is I can go into preferences and I can upgrade my default font size. There it is, 16. If I make it to 20, just so I can read it a little easier, watch what happens on the left hand side there. Can you see my P tag and my H2 didn't change size, but my H1 did? Let's exaggerate it a bit. So let's go up to 40. Can you see my H1, which was using my EAMS, has gone up a percentage, okay, to match the default font size. So, but my P tag and my H2 haven't. Okay, that means they are fixed forever at that size. So that can be handy for some things, but most, especially your type, needs to be done in EAMS. And the reason we love that is because Google loves that, and whatever Google loves, we do. All right, so that's the difference between EAMS and pixels. So a good default font size for body copy for EAMS is about 0.8. And a good default font size for titles gets, that's up to you totally. It's 1.7 and up, okay, depending on the style you want. Before we go, actually, what we'll do is we'll look at changing the font sizes. So at the moment, we'll change our P's from 12 point to, I'll change it to 0.0 EM, hit enter. You can see it's roughly the same size, and we'll change our H2 from 17 point to 1.4 EM, hit enter. You'll see it's roughly the same sort of size. But the nice thing about that now is that if I resize them in my browser, they will come along for the ride and resize with them. Okay, so from now on, you're banned from using pixels or points. You have to use EMs. All right, thanks for that. See you in the next tutorial.